Joining me today is Kris Nichols from New River Valley or NRV 911 over in
Yep.
Virginia, something like that.
Yep.
Um, and she is going to be presenting a session on CTO essentials, building trust, and identifying motivations. I am excited to see what this is going to happen, or how this session goes, rather.
So my name is Kris Nichols, and I am a communications training officer in a consolidated PSAP in Southwest Virginia. And today actually marks my 8-year anniversary as a dispatcher. And thank you. And I thought about it this morning. I was like, oh my gosh, it's February 3rd. And I've been a trainer for about 3.5 years. And first, I just want to tell everybody thank you so much for being here, because it always means so much to me that I have things to say and people hopefully want to listen to them and take away things from them. And I think the best part about a session like this one specifically is that every single person is going to take away something different. Every time I give it, I feel like I take away something different. And my hope is that if you just come away with one new perspective on motivations or trust or building relationships with people or even yourself, I will consider it a win. Even if it's just one person from this entire group watching gets something out of it, then I will consider it a success. So when I decided to create this specific training, I wanted to make it for my younger self, like things that I wish I knew when I started out being a dispatcher and then started out being a trainer. And because I'm the kind of person that if I have ever struggled on something, I want to be the last person to ever struggle on it ever. And I want to give all the knowledge of my mistakes and my triumphs to the next person so that they can take it and run with it. So our objectives today are interpret the differences between adult learning styles, the way information is presented, and how to utilize those in your training. We're going to be comparing psychological theories of need and motivation and how to implement them as training tools. And we're going to be defining trust and what it means to engage and build a relationship with your new trainee as well as your coworkers. So whether you have been a trainer for 25 years or 25 minutes, I guarantee you have heard something similar to teach how your trainee learns. I'm sure everybody's heard that at least once or twice. But what does that really mean? Are you saying that others don't learn exactly the way I do? That everyone isn't exactly like me? Of course they're not, because that would be conceited to think so, which that was me back in the day. I really thought everybody's brain worked exactly like mine, and I was going to train my trainees in the way that I wanted to be trained. So when I think about how someone learns now, to me, it doesn't necessarily mean like how they like to sit down and learn. To me, it's how do they process information in the way that's best for them. And the biggest thing I've learned is you do not train trainees the way you wanted to be trained, because yes, it's a noble concept, but you are never going to be a carbon copy of your trainee, and y'all are never going to be the exact same people. So everything that worked for you and didn't work for you is not going to work for them and not work for them and work for them at the same time. So in the beginning, that's what I did. I started training all my new people when I was fairly new at training on, this is everything I wanted. These were all the resources that I wanted. This is the way I wanted it. Everything was color coordinated. Everything was organized. Everything was just very crisp. And sometimes it would be a success with some trainees, and then sometimes I would fall short. And I wasn't understanding why, because in my mind, even though as conceited as it was, I was being the perfect trainer. But really, who was I being perfect for? I was being perfect for myself. And because I truly, truly believed that everybody just wanted all this information the way that I wanted that information. And when I finally came to that realization, it helped me become a better trainer. That not everyone's going to have the same personality style as me. the certain documents and materials that were wonderful for me are not going to be the same for other people, and vice versa. I've had people give me great documents in their minds that was perfect for them, and it looked like gibberish to me. So when I started adapting this ideology that, okay, you are not everyone else in the room, and everyone else in the room isn't you. It really just started like this light bulb went off in my brain that I could become a better trainer if I just started thinking differently. Because things that worked for trainee A did not work for trainee B, may end up working for trainee C, and then just when I felt like I was good, I got the swing of things, I knew what I was doing, trainee D came along and I was back to square one. But part of our job as a CTO is to help identify all the needs of our trainees and navigate them through the training process in the most effective way possible. They might come in and have no idea what they need. And that's your job as the trainer and the teacher and the mentor and everything else, is to break through, figure it out, and lead them on the way that they need to go. I'm sure everybody, if you've taken some kind of CTO class or even a supervisor's class or a learner's class, you've heard the 5 assumptions of adult learners. But we're going to go over them again because they're very important, and they're things that I wish I was more well versed on back in the day before I started training years ago. So Malcolm Knowles in the 80s coined these 5 assumptions about adult learners, and they are: adult learners are self-directed and they have self-concept. They are no longer children, obviously. They are autonomous beings. They desire independence to figure out how they need to do something, make their mistakes on their own, correct their mistakes on their own, just be more involved in their learning and their training, because that's what an adult does. And we as trainers need to give them that respect. They're not in 3rd grade and we're not their elementary school teacher. The second one is very important because this is another thing that I fell short on back in the day. And I think most people can fall into this negative one if you allow other people in dispatch or just public safety have a toxic, just a toxic view of it. For me, adult learners rely on their experience because experiences are crucial parts in an adult's learning. The material needs to be relevant for them, and they can make connections with their past experiences in life, past experiences in jobs, even relationships. Any kind of experience an adult has, they can turn it around to their learning and implement it. And this is the part where I fell short, is just because someone is coming to you with no public safety experience at all, that does not mean that they don't have any experience. And it's your job as the trainer to pick apart all of their previous jobs, whether it was volunteer, whether it was after school projects, or being a stay-at-home mom or stay-at-home dad, whatever they've done in their lives. Have them go through a day-to-day with you. Say, tell me about what you used to do on a day-to-day. And I guarantee you, as they're explaining to you what they used to do, you will be able to pick out a bunch of tangible skills that you can take and plop on over to dispatch. And once I started doing that, so much easier for me. And you can always get creative with them and make them realize that even though this is a very daunting job, they actually could possess way more skills than they actually already knew they had. And I'm pretty happy about that one. That one was a big light bulb for me when I finally got that one. Readiness to learn, it's very now. Adults don't really learn for the sake of learning. They learn more for skills that they need to implement immediately, like being hired for this job. Now I need to learn these skills so I can do for the job. Orientation to learning, they're very similar to readiness to learning. They need to have relevancy for the subject matter. Adults engage in problem-based learning instead of subject-based learning, which basically means that we as adults, what we're learning right now in our lives are going to be used for immediate action versus child learners who typically learn concepts that they won't apply until the future. So when you're in training, you're not teaching them the Pythagorean theory that they will never use or maybe use 10 years down the road. You are teaching them, this is what you do, this is what you do, this is what you do. And we're going to actually do them today. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And motivation to learn is the last one, that as adults age, motivation to learn shifts to internal. When you're a child learner, you have a lot of external, you go to school because you have to. You're trying to make people proud. You have to get good grades, X, Y, and Z. But as you grow older, a lot of it is internally motivated. And that's just something to make sure you tap into. And we'll talk a little bit more about those on later slides. So this is another section that people might be aware of already, but it is the VARK model, which was developed by educational theorist Neil Fleming in the 80s, I want to say, and he developed them as learning styles. So, you've got your visuals, which are PowerPoints, color-coordinated pictures, just pictures in general, maybe magazines. Auditory, which would be lectures, recordings, kind of what we're doing right now, or actual conversations and word of mouth. Reading, very obvious, texts, policies, emails, old notes, very, kind of black and white. The last one is kinesthetic, which is like hands-on learning, content creating, like making things themselves, using role play, dispatch, scenarios, like multi-sensory learners where a lot of things are going on at the same time, which is pretty much what we do every day. Half the stuff we do in dispatch is kinesthetic. But the key to remember about all of these is that not everyone falls into just one of these 4 categories. People try to pigeonhole somebody into one, like, oh, you're a visual learner, like that's what I'm going to focus on, or oh, I know you really like reading, so I'm just going to hammer you with policies and hammer you with things to read all day. And I think that's so detrimental, because I took this specific quiz once and I was right in the middle, and it had all these lines about what parts of me were all 4 of those. So instead of thinking of these are all the ways people can learn, just switch your mindset to these are all the ways that I can teach somebody, that I can present information to them. Utilize all of them, every single one of them. I guarantee you there's something you can find in each one of these columns that you can teach something in dispatch. And make sure you're having open dialogues with your trainees. Not everyone's going to know what these are. I sure did not before I became a dispatcher, and it was a couple years down the road before I really understood what they all were. But, once you get a trainee, you can ask them kind of when you go to learn something, how do you do it? How do you like to do it? And another big thing that has helped me tremendously in my training journey is one way to ensure that your trainee is processing all the information that you're giving them is to make sure that they're documenting it in a way that is good for them. Instead of making them do it how you would have done it, just let them have that ownership and flexibility and independence to do it themselves. And what I mean by that is I've had trainees make documents on Canva. I've had trainees make crossword puzzles. I've had them make little exercises, coloring things. And I've had trainees that just had one sheet of paper and one pencil, and they never did anything different. But as long as it's good for them and it's accurate and correct and efficient, it doesn't really matter to me what it is. I can look at it and, okay, well, that's not really what I use. But as long as they're understanding what they have and as long as they are comfortable with it, more power to them. Because then you go back to being an adult learner concept. That was something that they took ownership with, and you're giving them this information and they're processing it and saving it in their brains how they are comfortable. And, in order to keep yourself as effective as a trainer, you're just going to have to accept that reality that every single time you have another trainee, it's going to be completely different. And I would always be on like a high after I cut loose a trainee and they were successful and it was wonderful. And I would fall back into that. Okay, well, I'm going to do the same thing again with the next one. And then, of course, the next trainee I got was the total opposite of who I just trained. And then I had to go back to the drawing board. But it's not necessarily a bad thing. As long as I have the tools and I know all the options that are here for me with my next trainee, I can model it to them. And the visual, auditory, reading, kinesthetic always used to make me kind of nervous, because it just seems like when you see 4 things like this, you just expect like, I have to be one or the other. Like I can't be all of them. But I remember about a year ago, my husband and I went to a museum and we walked into the exhibits, and I would kind of go one way and he would go another way. And then we'd meet back in the middle and we would discuss this exhibit before we moved on to the next one. And about halfway through the museum, he was like, do you understand what's happening right now? And I think I was standing next to like a train. I said, no, what's going on? He said, well, look around, see how this museum is catering to all the different types of learners. And I started looking around and he was right. There were visual representations of something. There were auditory, where you could hear the sounds or pick up those phones and listen into something. There was plenty of reading. And then there was tactile, kinesthetic stuff. And it just blew my mind, because when he and we have very similar personalities, but we walked into the museum and I went one way, he went the other. We both looked at the museum in a different way. But at the very end, we still came back and we were able to discuss it and talk about what we felt and the information that we found. So whenever you get kind of frustrated that you may not be on the same level as your trainee with what they're doing, nobody is. Nobody is ever going to be exactly the same with how they process information and how they learn. And once I've started to kind of accept that and implement it in my training, I have noticed a world of difference in how I do it. So I hope that means that you guys will do the same when you kind of fall into a little bit of a rut trying to figure out what's the next step with your trainee. I love these. I read a book that was given to me by a friend, and it's Julie Durkin's book, Design for How People Learn. And it's a book all about training and instructional design. But this is my favorite part of the book, because she talks about gaps and all the possible gaps that you may encounter when you're trying to train somebody. And the first one is a knowledge gap. And that could be described as having the information, but not knowing what to do with that information. I know I have to enter in a traffic stop when an officer keys up and tells me he's on a traffic stop, but I don't know how to do it. The second one would be skills, knowing what needs to be done, but not understanding how to do it. Something that would need practice to master that skill, which would be, okay, I know that the traffic stop has to be entered into CAD, but I don't know which buttons to press. And I don't know exactly what code I need to input in order to put that traffic stop in that CAD. A motivational gap is somebody who knows what to do and how to do it, but chooses not to do it. And this one can be kind of tricky, because it's not necessarily means that they're lazy. So when you ever come across a trainee that you feel like it's a motivational problem, why? Is it anxiety? Do they know how to do it? They're just scared of messing it up. Do they know how to do it, but there's this big nagging voice in the back of their head going, I don't think you actually know what you're talking about. Confusion, distraction, interest, failing to see the bigger picture. Like, okay, well, I know I have to put this in the CAD, but why? What is the end game for me putting this traffic stop in CAD? There's a lot of different reasons why somebody could have a motivation gap. So it's not just being lazy or not wanting to do it. So that's a one where you'd have to really pull back the layers before you figured out what the issue was. The habit gap is when a task just has not been completed enough to form a habit, and like going off traffic stops again, with our CAD system, we can do it the drag, drop, click method. And I've been using that method for 8 years, and I will not be using anything different. But I teach my trainees how to do the command line. And first, second, third, fourth, fifth time they do the command line, it's hard, and they get frustrated, and they don't know what they're doing. But by the 30th time they've entered that, they can enter it in with their eyes closed. That's because they formed a habit. An environment gap would be, look around. Are you not providing a safe environment? Are you not providing an environment for growth? Do you have all those support tools? Do you have the resources? Do you have the technology? I also do equipment gap for this one, because this is a very dispatch specific book. So whenever I talk about environment gap, I put equipment there too. Because sometimes I've had trainees in the past that truly have had keyboard errors or headset errors or mouse errors. And it's not them, it's the equipment that was provided to them. So you have to really make sure when somebody is not getting a problem or not hearing correctly or not typing it down correctly, don't jump to the worst case scenario first. You have to investigate and figure out, okay, well, if it's an equipment issue, we need to document that, contact technology, get new equipment, and then see if that resolves the issue. If it doesn't resolve the issue, you can at least knock out, okay, it wasn't necessarily the equipment, it wasn't necessarily the environment. For communication gaps, it's exactly what it sounds like. Are you as the trainer not providing enough clear communication on what you need? Do you not have all your goals lined out? Do you not have what your expectations are? So I want you, next time you have a trainee and things may not be going how you need them to go, use this checklist. Like when you hit that brick wall, go through each gap, trying to identify what the issue might be. And when you finally identify the correct issue, for me personally, it's much easier to fix. When saying somebody is like not understanding or not getting it, or, oh, they can't do it, that's a very broad and dangerous statement to make when you're training somebody. It has to be as specific as possible. And the lower and lower and lower you get, and the more specific you get, the easier it is to identify the problem and then fix the problem. Because adult learners need to be respected. That's the main point, really, of this presentation. They expect open, honest dialogue. They expect to have clear goals and communications. You know, everybody knows your things like your DORs and your feedbacks. Those should never be a surprise, because all throughout the day and all throughout training, you should be able to express and tell them what's going on. And I remember back when I was an inexperienced trainer, I found myself being afraid a lot to give conflict, which could be an entire other session in itself. So I won't spend too much time on constructive feedback. But I thought it was my job, my sole job, to identify the problem, fix the problem, tell the trainee how to fix the problem, and then the trainee would fix the problem, all in my head. I would work out all these big things in my head and not know how to communicate to my trainee. I think this is what's wrong. I think this is my shortcomings. This is your shortcomings. This is the equipment shortcomings. Let's figure it all out and move on past it. And I think a lot of people in the beginning can have that fear that you don't really know how to communicate when there's a negative problem. But these specific gaps have been really beneficial to me, and I've really enjoyed them whenever I come up with a roadblock, because once I go through them, I find what I need, and then we move on. And they've been very beneficial to me. So I hope they'll be beneficial to you as well, or at least give you a different perspective on how to think about problems. So I'm sure you've all heard this question before, and probably have heard it 1,000 times by now, but I'm going to ask you again. Why are you in public safety? Some people's answers are the ones on the left. I want to make a difference. I love helping my community. I've wanted this career my whole life. Others, a little more practical. It's a job, salary and benefits. I applied and now I'm here. And then in the middle, I need money. And the question like that, why are you in public safety, or why do you have this job? To me, that is such a weighted question. Like, the question is up here, and there are so many different layers on exactly how to answer that question. Because getting a job in the very beginning, because it's stable, there's benefits, you needed money, you applied and now you've gotten a job and you're thankful and you're grateful to have that job. In the beginning, if those are your reasons to be here, I don't think that's anything to be ashamed of. It's not, because at the end of the day, why does anyone have a job? Unless you are a multi-billionaire or a unicorn or something that truly just does a job for fun because you don't have any bills and you don't have any other responsibilities. But people get jobs because we need to support our families. We need to support our lives. We need to support everything. So at the end of the day, when someone asks a question like that in the beginning and someone answers it truthfully, I feel like it's not something to be ashamed of. And I think seasoned people or coworkers, it could be like a point of contention with them, or even trainers. Like, what do you mean this is just a job to you? Like, this isn't a job to me. I love this job. Whenever you get into that kind of mindset, think back on what you did years ago when you first started dispatching. Where did you fall in those? Did you fall in a little bit of both? Were you on the left, the right, in the middle? You know, people get wrapped up in thinking we need to be pulled into a career our entire lives, right? That we have hoped and dreamed for, running around at 2 years old. I want to be a dispatcher. And if we don't feel that way in the beginning, I feel like we can get shamed and judged by the coworkers or trainers or who else. But in the beginning, if somebody's reasons for wanting a job, especially in public safety, when the job market is the way it is nowadays, is that they want a steady paycheck and good benefits, I think it's an admirable reason to want a job, because as time goes on, people become more and more comfortable and confident in their jobs. Their motivations and their needs change. I remember when I first started this job 8 years ago, and it was for a lot of the same reasons. I had graduated college, and I applied to a ton of jobs, and nobody was really hiring. And my dad, who was a police officer at the time, he still is, told me that they were hiring at the police department he worked at. And I was like, okay, well, I guess I can work there for a little bit. It seems like it's a really good, stable job. And I had student loans coming up. I had a car payment. I had all these big girl adult things that I had to start doing. So I started working in dispatch. And during years later, during some self-reflection on how to be a better dispatcher and how to be a better trainer, I was going through the APCO Research CTO class. And there was a slide that touched on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I remember I took a class that was in college where that popped up, and I was not interested. I think I ended up dropping the class. But 10 years later, as an adult, and I'm sitting here looking at the slide talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, everything just clicked. I had so much clarity. I couldn't believe that I had never really paid attention to this stuff before, because it all made sense. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a theory created by psychologist Abraham Maslow in the 1940s. In his works, he states that everyone is motivated by different types of physiological needs in the beginning, but he categorizes them in a pyramid with the basic needs on the bottom, and the more advanced needs, the higher you go. So he splits them into 5 levels. The bottom is physiological, middle is safety, social, esteem, self-actualization. So Maslow theorizes that all humans have this innate desire to climb the pyramid to reach self-actualization. And as I'm learning this theory again as an adult, it just rang so true to me, because Years ago, back in the day, when I started working in dispatch, I was 21 years old, I was 21 years old. I wanted to move out of my parents' house. I wanted to be an adult. I wanted to pay bills. I wanted to gain independence. And that's where I hit at the bottom: food, water, air, shelter. If those needs weren't met, I couldn't move on. And by getting out of the house, moving out of the house, accepting a job that I was interested in, but it was not a job that I thought, this is it. This is my dream job. To be honest with you, that's not what I thought. And I am shocked that I'm being so honest, but I feel like at the end of the day, people do need to be honest, because now I can't imagine myself doing anything else. I have grown. I have gone up this pyramid. I have matured and changed. But in the very, very beginning, I was only looking out for my basics, my food, water, air, and shelter. But once I started going through dispatch and I made it through training, and then I moved and I went to my second organization, the one I'm at now. Then I made it through training the second time. And I started looking around and realizing I can do this. I'm actually really good at this job. People really trust me. One day I could be a trainer and I can train new people. I realized that I was going up the ladder, going up the hierarchy. When I was promoted to trainer and I hit my 5-year, I was vested into my state's retirement. I was no longer the new kid. I was very comfortable and confident with myself. I would have younger dispatchers come to me with questions and advice and tell them, help me figure this out, or what did you do? What would you do in this situation? The older dispatchers, I was noticing, were starting to respect me more, and we were more on the same level. And I just felt like I kept unlocking versions of myself, and I was like evolving almost like a Pokemon. And when I got my ENP, my emergency numbers professional cert, back last spring, it just even lifted me higher. That I was like, oh my gosh, I have so much pride in what I do. I love training. I love doing this kind of stuff. I love meeting people and I love connecting people. But that's because it took me a little while to get there. I didn't just start out at 21 years old at the very top of the pyramid on my first day of dispatching. So if anything, I want you to think, instead of what made you work in public safety, start thinking about what made you stay in public safety. Because when you do reflections on yourself, on what your motivations are and what your internal why, and why am I fulfilled? Why do I love this job? Why do I want to stay? It gives a little bit more grace to people in the beginning, that you as a trainer get to help them unlock that, get to help them find that. You get to help them find their passion and their place, not just at your center, but their place in public safety as a whole. And that's one of my favorite parts about being a trainer, because I have some of my little baby trainers now, or trainees now, and they're going off and doing so many amazing things, not just in our dispatch center. They're going around and they're working with radios, and they're, trying to do extra trainings and going out and spreading their wings. And I think that's fantastic that I helped start that, ball rolling with them. And I know they would have come up with it on their own, but the fact that I get to watch them kind of start from the bottom of that pyramid and work their way up, to me, it's really awesome, because when you're a trainer, you have a pretty good idea about where you're going to fall in this, right? Obviously, when someone comes to you in dispatch, you're not their food, water, air, and shelter, right? But once you start hitting the safety one, you can help them become more financially secure in their, because when they're training and they're doing well and they're getting better and they're doing good things, then they're not going to worry about, oh my gosh, I'm going to get fired. Oh my gosh, I'm not going to be able to make it through training. So the more you offer a positive and wonderful experience, the more that person is going to become confident, and they're going to start rising up that ladder. And as time goes on, everyone's needs and motivations are going to change. Maybe something they wanted in the beginning isn't something what they wanted later down the road. But when your trainee starts feeling comfortable and confident, they can start going up to the social. Once you don't feel like the new person anymore, and once you're doing calls correctly and your coworker looks at you and says, hey, good job, or you do a traffic stop really well and an officer calls in and says, hey, I just want to say you handled that really well. That is making them, every time that something like that happens, it gives them another little burst of, I'm meant to be here. I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And you have a lot of weight as the trainer in these areas, because without proper training, without proper feedback, defined goals, positive reinforcements, the trainee's most likely not going to feel accepted, and they're not going to feel like they made the right choice. Because as a trainer, you're their teacher, you're their coach, and as easier as the job is to them, things are going to start clicking, and they can, start shifting their focus to workplace relationships and finding their place at the agency. And that's a lot of fun to watch as a trainer, because the better a trainee feels, the better they perform, and it's just on top. They're just building those blocks, but your job is to help build those in the beginning. And every time they complete a task successfully and they get kudos, that's something else that knocks them up. They're going to be constantly raising up higher and higher. And eventually they'll get to the needs and self-esteem. The self-esteem needs and the self-actualization needs. But I remember what it was like for me in those early days, where I started to feel confident and comfortable, and I was pushing myself more, and I was constantly looking out for the next thing, because I had built all those blocks and I just kept building them. And I'm definitely not at the top of the pyramid, because I don't like the idea that there's nowhere else for me to go. So I hope I don't reach that top for a very long time. That'll always give me a place to go. But once I started understanding Maslow's hierarchy of needs and how to implement it into training, it has completely changed my life, with being able to empathize with people more and listen and really see people for who they are and what their motivations are. And I feel like it's a good concept to at least have when you train. Another one, which is kind of like a piggyback onto Maslow's, would be McClelland's theory of needs. And he is a psychologist who created these in the 60s. And he states that regardless of your age, your status, your culture, every person is either driven by achievement, motivation, and or affiliation or power. Sorry, I said motivation, not power. So the achievement-oriented people are always looking for the next challenges. They're not into low-risk situations because they feel like they'll just get them too easily, but also they don't do a lot of high-risk situations because they feel like if they get it, it'll just be because of luck. And they take very premeditated risks. They prefer to work alone. They thrive on difficult objectives and goals, and the more goals they pass, the more they collect, that's what fulfills them. The power-oriented people are motivated by status, rising to leadership. They're very driven, they're very organized, they like competitions, they like having influence over others. And then motivated by affiliation, these people love to work in group settings. They typically will go along with what the group wants. They don't involve themselves in high-risk situations. They're not very fond of competitions, and their motivation is to feel seen and heard and be along with the group. And just by looking at these, I know exactly which one I am. I am an achievement-oriented person. And I thought everybody was like that. But as I get older and more mature, and I start realizing I am not the only person in this world. There are billions of other people in this world. And they all think differently. Just because they're motivated by power or affiliation, or they like competitions and I don't, doesn't mean that they're wrong, doesn't mean that I'm right. But now I can see them, and now I can understand them. And I think McClelland's and Maslow's theories, even if you just took them and Googled them later and read up on them on your own, I really hope that they will help you learn how to train your next trainer or trainee. So the biggest thing for me about these is this: it's just taken a lot of the unknown out of my training that I can now, and you don't really have to pigeonhole people into these things or look at someone and go, oh, I know what your motivations are. I know what your affiliations are, whatever, because those are personal. People, may not go around talking about what motivates them or what's important to them, but just knowing that there's a huge group of what somebody could be motivated for, and even if it doesn't align in your own, it can kind of change how you train them or change how you come about it. So trustworthy, for Webster's dictionary, he defines it as worthy of confidence and dependable. And trust is defined as assured reliance on the character, the ability, strength, or truth of someone or something. An article on success.com compiled the characteristics of trustworthy people. And I really liked these specific words, was the ones that I ended up picking. I liked that authentic was up there, because authentic just means being genuine and real. And if you're going to be having a mutual trust relationship with your trainee, you need to be authentic. Don't pick now to become somebody you're not. Don't pick, oh, they've never met me before, I can reinvent myself. It doesn't work. I've tried. You need to be yourself and be authentic. Have integrity. Have the values that you stand up for and what you think is right. And it doesn't necessarily just have to be dispatch related, just know in your heart what your values are and what you're going to stick to and what you're going to tolerate and what you're not. Kind, exactly what it sounds like. We need more kind people in life. I love connectors, because to me that means someone who just creates meaningful relationships with people. And there aren't that many. You can have a lot of acquaintances and you can have a lot of people that are nice to you, but that don't truly take the time to get to connect with you. And you don't have to be your trainee's best friend at the end of the day, but you are training your future coworker. So trying to form these connections with them, I think, will be extremely beneficial for you and your center in the long run. People who are consistent, they're reliable, someone who's always there, dependent. Compassion, exactly what it sounds like. Someone who just shows compassion and empathy and sympathy. Someone who's just a very sweet person that shows all of those emotions when needed. Resourceful. I love this. And I know some people in my dispatch center that are resourceful, that can change plans, adapt right in the middle of a plan, know exactly what A, B, C, D, E, F, G is, and can switch on a dime. And I'm a very black and white person sometimes, so when the plan has to change, I get a little sideways. But I trust the people in my center that are resourceful, that can change on a dime, and I'm really grateful for people like that. Humble, also exactly what it sounds like. If you're trying to build a relationship with a trainee and a new person, you need to be humble and be confident when you know something, humble when you don't. And all of those are great goals, and you're not going to meet every single one of those every single day. I'm absolutely not a perfect trainer every single day, and nobody is. But there's always good goals to strive for, because this job isn't always easy. And when you add being a CTO into the mix, it has a lot of layers. You're somebody's immediate line, but you're not their supervisor, but you're their trainer. But you're also sort of their friend. You're their future coworker. I mean, there's a lot of layers that you gotta kind of go through. And it's a vulnerable job. It's a wonderful job. It's a stressful job. But I wouldn't change it. I love it to death. So if you have ever been one of my trainees, you have heard me say this a billion times. I compare gaining trust to climbing a ladder. With each task you complete successfully, the higher you're going to climb. But each mistake or failure to follow through, you'll take a step back down. And I always tell my trainees, I will drill it into their heads until the cows come home. Be the person that someone is going to be proud to work with. Be the person who someone is going to be proud to see you walk in the door and that you're going to sit next to them and that they know it's going to be an amazing day because you're their pod mate. Be the person that when the officer marks up on his MDT and sees your name in the call notes, he knows it's going to be a good day. Or when the fireman hears your voice on the radio, he knows it's going to be a good day. If you strive for anything else, pick that. Just pick the person that I just get really emotional when it comes to this part because that's what I strive to be. I strive to be the trainer that everyone is happy and thankful they have. I try to strive to be the coworker people are thankful and lucky to have. I don't always hit the mark. Nobody does. But it's something that I'm always constantly striving for. And how you react to your mistakes, how you correct your mistakes, how you handle stress and conflict, even as a trainer or just as a dispatcher when you're not training anybody. Those are things to think about when you are trying to mold the next generation of your dispatchers that are going to be coming to your center. Just try to be somebody who's someone else is proud to work with. You know, gaining trust with your trainee kind of goes off of what I was saying. You know, be transparent with them. Always tell them if there's something that they need to know, where they're going in shifts, or if they're rotating, or if they're doing a ride along, or if they have to leave early, you tell them. Don't let them be any weird surprises. Y'all are all adults. There don't need to be any secrets or surprises with them. Be confident when you know something. Be humble when you don't. If you don't know something, find somebody in the room that's going to know it. Make sure that you effectively communicate. Everybody works on this. I still work on this daily. Make sure you stay informed. If you're a trainer and there's new policies coming out and you don't even know how to do them because you didn't read the policy, you are not going to be instilling a lot of trust in your training. They're going to look at you and say, okay, this policy came out 2 months ago and you don't know how to do it. Always have an open dialogue with your trainee. Show them that your learning never stops. Almost every single day when I have a trainee, I learn something new. Or I say, I'll ask somebody that question for you. And then I learn it because it was just a question or a scenario that never came up and I haven't had to deal with before. Set clear goals and give good, clear feedback. Set good examples. I have an example of setting a good example. I had a trainee a while back that called me out on not following a fire and rescue policy correct because I would forget to do the cross streets in the final page or the initial page. And instead of telling her, do as I say, not as I do, or don't worry about it, I said, you know what? You're right. That is in the policy and I was messing it up and I shouldn't have. So what did I do? I wrote a little sticky note and stuck it on my console. And so for the rest of the day and for the rest of the shift and every day since, I try to do better and not forget those. And I feel like that's such a small thing, but I think in that moment, she saw that I could be trustworthy, that I did admit my mistakes, and I could have done something different, but I did not. Gaining trust with your coworkers is kind of the same. You know, you have to be willing to work with them, to learn from them. You know, sometimes it's hard being the new dispatcher because you have people that could literally have been dispatching for 30 years or being on the same shift for 15. And it's scary being the new person. But as long as you take all the things that you're teaching your trainee on how to be trustworthy and how to be a good person when it comes to the dispatch floor, they're going to turn around and do the same thing with their coworkers. Gaining trust with the public, that is every time you do a call correctly or you handle something correctly, even though that one person may never speak to you again, you handled it right, and that they're going to go away with a better idea of you as 911 than they did before, right? You represent, when you answer that phone, you're not just representing yourself or your agency or your town or your sheriff or your police chief. You're representing 911 as a whole. And that's what I try to strive for too. When I answer these calls, and even if they're really, really, really hard, they don't have any idea who I am. For all they know, I could be in a call center in New York City. Like, sometimes people truly don't know who they're speaking to, but they know it's 911. So I always try to strive to always be the best person I can be, especially if my trainee's watching, especially if my coworkers are watching. I don't like to disappoint people. I don't like to make mistakes. So I'm happy that I have that drive to always want to do better. Yeah. Oh, no, not done. So I think we're okay on time, because now my time's all messed up. I don't know what time we actually started this. But
you started at like 25 after. So
okay, cool. So we're good. We're good for as I wrap it up. Thank you. So the main takeaway for all of this is that the theories and principles we went over all have a lot of overlapping themes. If you had been paying attention and made all the connections, that they're all very, very similar. They're just worded differently or done by someone different, or some other theorist did this one. But I hope that if you just take one thing away from this session, is that you're just now acknowledging the fact that every single person is differently and they all think differently. And I personally think, as a trainer, you should be aware of these concepts, how to present information, the learning styles, the techniques, the motivators. You should have plenty of tools in your dispatch toolbox to pick from every single time you have a new trainee. And when I made this session, I'm really just presenting to my 21-year-old self. I wish I knew all these things. I wish somebody had sat me down and explained it to me. And it's fine, it happens, but I'm hoping that I have at least gathered enough knowledge and I'm giving it out into the world. And even if you see something on the PowerPoint that you want to go Google later, and Google will tell you way more than I did, that makes me happy. At least I put that idea in your head for change or to make something better. And you not only have to make sure that you're training your trainees the way they need to be trained, but you need to make sure you're engaging them. You're having open, honest, respectful, mutual connections and relationships with them. They need to feel appreciated. They need to feel heard. They need to be given a place to thrive. So much negativity can happen in the dispatch center. And you, as a trainer, have such a big job with facilitating that, and you can shape so much, way more than you can. And you're going to have some good days. You're going to have some amazing days, but you're also going to have really bad days and really crummy days. But if I could say anything to y'all, it would be, don't give up, because you are so important. And I know, even if you're watching something like this, I know that you're good at your job. I know that you want to even be better at your job. I know that you're taking the time out of your day to watch me, someone you don't even know, tell you about things. And I appreciate that from the bottom of my heart, that y'all are here watching me. Because what we do matters. What you do matters, especially training the new generation of dispatchers. We have so much power in our hands for shaping so much goodness. And then in turn, that trickles down to creating fantastic dispatchers that feel validated and heard, that are going to then turn and treat the public that way, and then save lives. And that, to me, is why I do what I do. So whatever your reasons are for being in this job, whatever reasons that you got your job, they're all valid. They're all respected. They're all admirable. And I hope that you've taken away a little bit of more information from this session. And I am very thankful you all came and stuck around, especially during the technology era. But I'd love to connect with y'all. You can find me on LinkedIn or Facebook. You can email me at that email down there, or whatever. I love talking about training and I love connecting with new people. So hit me up if you want. And thank you so much.